Hello, my dear students. Welcome to my class of today. Today, I am going to discuss reproductive cycles in mammals, which is a chapter in developmental biology. I am Dr. MEERA B.K, Associate Professor and Head, Department of Zoology, Maharani Science College for Women, Palace Road, Bangalore 1. On this slide, you can see my mobile number and so also my email ID. After the class, if you have any queries or doubts, you are most welcome to contact me either over my cell phone or over my email ID. Let us begin the class now. The lifespan of an individual of any vertebrate is divisible into three phases like pre-reproductive phase, reproductive phase, and post-reproductive phase. In pre-reproductive phase, there is excessive growth of not only other structures of the body but also of gonads. Thus, by the end of this phase, the organism acquires sexually mature gonads which are ready for sexual reproduction. The second phase happens to be the reproductive phase where the individual is active sexually during this phase and reproduces several times. The pattern of reproduction being essentially cyclical, that is, the animal reproduces periodically. And in the last phase, that is post-reproductive phase, there occurs gonadal sterility resulting in decline in reproduction. And the female mammals normally practice two types of reproductive cycles. They are estrous cycle and menstrual cycle. Class Mammalia can be broadly divided into non-primates and primates. All non-primates have been put under strepsirrhines and all primates have been put under haplorhines. Further, primates are divided into Old World monkeys and New World monkeys. Old World monkeys like us come under Catarrhinae and New World monkeys are put under Platyrrhinae. Now, let us discuss about estrous cycle. With the approach of puberty, that is adolescence, all non-primate females exhibit a well-marked functional rhythm of reproductive system and it is called a cycle. Though each species has its own peculiarities in respect to the pattern of estrous cycle, the basic steps remain the same. Now, let us look into the duration of estrous cycle in different mammals. Now, in exotic cow, the duration is 18 to 24 days. That means one estrous cycle lasts for about 18 to 24 days and one particular phase called estrus or the period of heat during which the female will be ready to accept the male and copulate for reproductive purposes and this estrus phase lasts for about 18 hours. And in buffalo, 18 to 24 days, same as exotic cow, but the estrus period lasts for about 16 hours. Then in sow, the estrous cycle repeats once in every 20 to 22 days and the phase of estrus lasts for about 72 hours and please note that only during this phase of estrus the female will be ready to accept the male, and if at all, if copulation and conceivement, further gestation has to happen, it's only within this estrus period. Then in case of goat, it runs for 18 to 20 days and estrus lasts for about 42 hours. Mare, the cycle runs once in 19 to 23 days and the estrus lasts for about 120 hours. In case of bitch, 2 to 4 cycles are run in an year and the estrus lasts for about 240 hours. In case of cat, 2 to 3 cycles per year and estrus lasts for about 240 hours provided there is no coitus, that is copulation or mating, whatever you say, and for about 96 hours in case there is coitus. Then in case of Eve, the estrus cycle lasts for about 16 to 18 days and the estrus phase lasts for about 36 hours. This is a brief account of duration of estrus in different mammals. Now let us see the types of estrus cycle. Some of the animals like deer exhibit sexual periodicity only once during breeding season. Such animals are called monoestrus animals. Mono means one, estrus means estrus phase. Then there are few animals which exhibit sexual periodicity twice during breeding season. They are called diestrus animals. And majority of them are polyestrus animals which exhibit sexual periodicity a number of times during a year. All laboratory rodents like rats and mice, they exhibit polyestrus cycle. Now, with this background, let us learn the different phases of estrus cycle. Initially only I have told you that though there are deviations and peculiarities with reference to each mammal, the basic plan or the basic phases remain the same. So the estrus cycle is commonly divided into 4 phases, namely Proestrus, Estrus, Metestrus and Diestrus. However, please note, based on the hormonal status of the animals, the cycle or the period can be divided conveniently into 2 as below. First one, estrogenic phase or follicular phase or proliferative phase, which consists of Proestrus and Estrus phases. And then the second one, progestational, luteal or secretory phase comprising of Metestrus and Diestrus. Now let us study the major changes that take place in the reproductive system of the mammals which run the estrus cycle in different stages like Proestrus, Estrus, Metestrus and Diestrus, and also let us study what would be the hormonal impact, because ultimately whether it is estrus cycle or menstrual cycle, any reproductive cycle for that matter, is under neuroendocrine regulation. So we have to keep a note of the hormonal milieu or the titer in each stage of estrus cycle. Then coming to the first one, Proestrus, it is ill-defined period which is accompanied with growth of Graafian follicle under the influence of the hormone FSH, follicle stimulating hormone elaborated from adenohypophysis, which acts on ovaries in turn. Then the theca interna of Graafian follicle secretes increasing amounts of estradiol, resulting in its increased circulatory levels. Students, please note that ovaries secrete estrogens. Estrogen are a group of steroid hormones. There are 3 types of estrogens: estradiol, estriol and estrone. And at this stage you find large quantities of estradiol. Then there is elimination of increased amounts of estrogens through urine. Then there is rapid regeneration of corpus luteum, that is post-ovulatory body, both in morphology and function. There is decreasing amount of progesterone in circulation as FSH is in higher titers and so also estrogen. Basically, Proestrus comes under estrogenic phase. The higher levels of estrogen in circulation causes edema and swelling of vulva. Vulva is the technical name for external genitalia. Then there is further increased vascularity, that is blood supply or circulatory supply of the secondary organs of reproduction such as uterus, vagina, etc. Then gradual cornification of vaginal epithelium takes place in rats, dogs, etc. Normally, the vagina is lined by columnar epithelium, and during this phase, gradual cornification takes place in the sense there is deposition of keratin. Then, at this stage, the microscopic examination of vaginal smear from rats exhibit many large nucleated mucosal cells but no leukocytes. Students, please note this point. Microscopic examination of vaginal smear from rats exhibit many large nucleated mucosal cells but no leukocytes. So, figure A will tell you how a nucleated epithelial cell looks like, and the vaginal smear, if you prepare, when the rat is in Proestrus stage, the slide appears like this. At this juncture, I would like to tell you that there is a technique called vaginal smear technology. You can just take a medicine dropper with a drop of distilled water, insert into the vagina of rats, then suck the fluid present there, then make a thin smear of it onto a clean slide and stain, or without stain also you can observe. And if you see predominantly these nucleated mucosal cells, invariably you can say that the rat is in Proestrus stage. So, study of microscopic examination of vaginal smear will tell you the stage of estrus that the rat is undergoing. Then there is gradual relaxation of the cervix. There is increased secretion of mucus from goblet cells of cervix and vagina. There is increased vascularity of the endometrium. Endometrium is the innermost lining of the uterus. And bleeding in bitches, especially in dogs. There is visible bleeding the way it happens during menstrual cycles. But in most of the estrous cycle practicing females, you don't see this visual loss of blood. Here also, the bleeding is very scanty. Then, growth of the cell and cilia of the oviduct takes place, and the animal tends to show interest in male at later stages. So, these are all the changes that you see in the reproductive system, in the behavior of the animal which is in Proestrus stage. And then the next stage, from Proestrus, the female enters into the estrus stage. It is very well defined, unlike Proestrus, and it is identified by the behavioral change. There is acute desire of female to accept the male for the purposes of copulation and reproduction. Then, the changes of Proestrus are intensified in the sense the Graafian follicle becomes large and mature, the ovum undergoes maturation changes, the oviduct becomes tonic, the muscles, smooth muscles of oviduct become tonic, and exhibit spontaneous movement in order to push the released ovum. Then the epithelium of the oviduct matures and the cilia become active. The fimbriae, the finger-shaped projections in the anterior part of the oviduct, they arrange themselves very close to the Graafian follicle in the anticipation of collection of the released ovum. Please note that the ovum is not released directly into the fallopian tube, instead into the abdominal cavity, and the ovum released is picked up by these fimbriae. Then the circulatory supply to the entire reproductive tract is increased and the mucous membrane of the vagina exhibits congestion. There is increased migration of leukocells in uterine lumen. Increased secretion of mucus by well-developed goblet cells takes place. Vulva becomes relaxed and edematous and strings of mucus may hang out, especially in case of cows. The cervix becomes relaxed and pliable. Now, in most of the species, ovulation occurs towards the end of estrus. At the end of estrus phase, ovulation occurs, but in case of cow, it happens at about 12 hours after the end of estrus. These species of animals where the ovulation is not dependent upon the coitus, it is called spontaneous ovulation. Whether coitus takes place or not, ovulation takes place. But there are certain animals like cat, ferret, rabbit, etc. where the ovulation takes place if at all if coitus takes place. That means they are induced ovulators. Thus, in these animals which are induced ovulators, ovulation may be prolonged in absence of coitus. Then in many animals like dog, cat, etc., the carnified vaginal epithelium undergoes desquamation. And at this stage, if you make a vaginal smear, what exactly you see is very high percentage of carnified epithelial cells. A carnified epithelial cell looks like this, and this is a vaginal smear preparation prepared when the animal is in estrus phase. So, in vaginal smear, predominantly if you see the carnified epithelial cell, without studying anything else, you can just say that the rat is in estrus phase. Then estrus phase is followed by Metestrus. It is also ill-defined period like Proestrus, but it is mostly under the influence of progesterone. Progesterone is released under the stimulation of LH, that is luteinizing hormone, elaborated from adenohypophysis. Now, the progestogenic phase starts with the onset of Metestrus. What are the changes? Number one, by now ovulation would have taken place and therefore Graafian follicle now would have got transformed into post-ovulatory body called yellow body or corpus luteum. So accumulation of hemorrhagic fluid in the cavity due to rupture of the Graafian follicle leading to the formation of corpus hemorrhagicum. And the granulosous cells of this corpus hemorrhagicum proliferate to form the luteal cells. These cells develop rapidly under the influence of LH, luteinizing hormone, or also called LTH, luteotrophic hormone, to become corpus luteum or yellow body, that is post-ovulatory body. Then the corpus luteum, thus formed, acts as an endocrine gland. Please note that basically ovaries elaborate progesterone, but corpus luteum, once it develops, starts acting as endocrine gland, and secretes increasing amounts of progesterone till it starts regressing in the absence of pregnancy. If there is no gestation, which is the technical term for pregnancy, the corpus luteum regresses, but till then it keeps secreting progesterone. The higher titers, that is milieu or concentration of circulating progesterone, inhibits the release of FSHRH, that is release factor from hypothalamus, and thereby prevent development of more Graafian follicle and immediate recurrence of another estrus. Thus, there is three-level regulation of the estrus cycle, one at the level of hypothalamus, another at the level of hypophysis, another at the level of gonad, that is the ovary. Next change is vaginal wall loses most of its new growth. The epithelial cells undergo desquamation, a process assisted by heavy invasion of leukocytes. I'll show the photograph in the next slide, so that the epithelium returns to its normal columnar cell type. At this point, I would like to highlight one point. In cows, during early Metestrus, the epithelium becomes hyperemic, that is physiological ischemia, that is temporary cessation of circulatory supply, and some bleeding may occur, and this is called menstrual bleeding. This is due to estrogen withdrawal, and this is against menstrual bleeding in primates. I'll tell you a little later in my second part of the talk, which is due to progesterone withdrawal. Please remember this point. Then the mucus secretion throughout the tract decreases. The uterine glands undergo further growth. It becomes soft and pliable to touch. There is gradual loss of tone of the oviduct. This phase is followed by diestrus. And the microscopic examination of vaginal smear at this stage exhibits large number of leukocytes, some nucleated and some non-nucleated mucosal cells. So the leukocytes look like this, and if the vaginal smear shows cells, combination of cells like this, you can say definitely the rat is in Metestrus stage of its estrous cycle. Then the last phase is diestrus. This is the longest period of estrous cycle, characterized by presence of mature corpus luteum and high levels of circulating progesterone. The endometrium thickens. By now you must be knowing that the wall of the uterus has three layers: outer perimetrium, middle myometrium, and inner endometrium. And this endometrium thickens, and this effect is known as lace curtain effect, and the uterine glands undergo hypertrophy. Cervix becomes constricted, the cervical and vaginal mucosa scant. Vaginal mucosa becomes pale. At late diestrus, in the absence of pregnancy, that is gestation, corpus luteum starts regressing, in which case it is called corpus luteum spurium, accompanied with retrogressive changes in the endometrium and the uterine gland. And this is followed by Proestrus, and this is how the cycle repeats. In case of gestation, if there is pregnancy, the corpus luteum continues to function and continues to secrete more and more progesterone to maintain pregnancy, and now it is called corpus luteum virum. At this stage, microscopic examination of vaginal smear from rats exhibit decreasing number of leukocytes and presence of non-nucleated mucosal cells. The diestrus vaginal smear preparation more or less looks like this. Apart from these four stages, often we talk of another stage, what is known as anestrus stage, where ovaries and reproductive tracts are in quiescent state, that is lull phase. There is absence of corpus luteum in ovaries, pale vaginal mucosa, tightly closed cervix, and loss of uterine tone. Students, This entire cycle, estrous cycle, is under neuroendocrine regulation. Here and there I have touched upon few points. However, I am going to discuss in detail when I discuss about the neuroendocrine regulation of menstrual cycle. Thank you for your patient listening. If there are any queries and questions, do contact me through at my cell phone or through mail. Thanks a lot.